What's up gamers, welcome to the Diablo 4 guides. Today, we are talking about the Sorcerer, master of Frost, Fire, and Lightning. Sorcerer's main energy bar is mana. This fills up gradually over time, and there isn't really a reliable way to replenish this. You just gotta wait for that refill. You start off fights at maximum potential with all of that mana, and then you gotta wait for your mana to build back up. So let's start off talking about Frost magic. Here we got ourselves Firebolt. This does a bolt of damage to the target and chills them for 15%. This is going to be slowing their movement speed, and hitting them repeatedly will eventually freeze them. Enhanced Frostbolt will make you explode frozen enemies. This will do a cone of AoE damage around the target for some massive extra damage to it and all targets around it. For your secondary skill, Frozen Orb shoots out a spinning, freezing orb that deals massive damage, chills targets, and is just super fun to play with. Once you pick this thing up, you don't spend a lot of time casting anything else. Enhancing Frozen Orb just makes it deal extra damage when you're full on mana. That huge amount of increased damage is just so rewarding with this skill. We can enhance this with both Destructive Frozen Orb, which makes the explosion restore 5 mana when hitting a frozen enemy, or Greater Frozen Orb, which has a 25 chance to make all enemies vulnerable. This one was really good. This specialization just melted enemies. It was really great at picking out packs of enemies. It had a little bit of struggle with the higher HP ones, if the Frozen Orb wasn't cast above 50% HP. There was very little elite enemies could do against the specialization. The freezing effect is just so good against elites. You freeze them in place and absolutely melt their health pools. This felt amazing. Now on the boss, that changes up a little bit. The boss can't actually be frozen, and that meant so much of our increased damage potential was just gone. This felt very jarring. You went up against anything else and it was very rewarding and everything worked exactly how you expected to. And then on a boss, this specialization fell apart. It did not feel like a frost mage at all because there was no real slowing effect happening, no freezing. None of the effects you wanted to happen were effective on the boss. So that was a little bit unfortunate with these two skills. On the trash, absolutely a fun specialization. On bosses, kinda lackluster. Instead of the Frozen Orb, you can take Ice Shards. This shoots out 5 rapid ice projectiles that do a lot of damage. This is a really good boss killer. Enhancing it has a chance to ricochet to additional enemies, which also makes it good at clearing out trash. Although the Frozen Orb felt more visually fun, I actually think this skill is quite a bit stronger. You can enhance it with Destructive Ice Shards. Hitting an enemy with 5 different shards makes it vulnerable, which is excellent against the boss. We weren't able to get any barriers at these earlier levels, and so Glider Ice Lance, we didn't really get to feel the potential of it. But treating enemies as if they're frozen is absolutely massive against bosses because you can't actually freeze them. So that's a really important skill once you're able to get some barriers. I do think this is the superior secondary skill to the Ice Shard, although you felt a difference in playstyle. I think the Ice Orb feels better. The Frozen Orb feels better, but this is actually stronger. It's kind of funny how your brain works that way. The Ice Orb is just so much more rewarding visually and feels more impactful, but this one is just so much stronger. Just watch as we melt this elite in just a couple of shots. I don't think any specialization has killed an elite this quickly for me. On the boss, this specialization just was so good. It was able to cleave down those adds, as well as it just did so much damage to the boss. His health melted away every time I cast that multi-shot attack. The vulnerable on him was just so good. I definitely felt like I was having a good time being a Frost Mage playing with this specialization. I definitely feel that Frost Mage hit the thematic feel that you're looking for with both the specializations. It feels really good. The vulnerable thing just is awesome. I am loving this Sorcerer specialization. For Pyromancy, we got Firebolt. This is just a basic little bolt that burns the target. Pretty standard fire attack. Enhancing it makes it pierce through burning enemies to be able to stack that burn up on multiple targets. This felt really good. Incinerate is a channeling a beam of fire that burns enemies for significant damage. This just felt like you were erupting the world on fire. I absolutely loved casting it every time that I did. Enhanced Incinerate makes you just pulse out fire while casting Incinerate, so you do this like pulsing fire around you. This just helps with additional damage around you and burning the primary target. Enhancing this with Destructive Incinerate makes us let enemies deal less damage while they're burning, which was really great for taking on lots of enemies and be able to take those hits. Greater Incinerate makes it for every 4 seconds an enemy has been hit by Incinerate, they are immobilized for 1 second. So as you burn them for 4 seconds, then they're immobilized and can't move for a short amount of time. This is really good for control. Overall, both of these were excellent options. I prefer the immobilize probably over the reduction in incoming damage taken. Similar to the Barbarian, overall, the fire specialization kind of felt weaker. You were waiting for the enemies to burn down, and it felt like with all the other specializations, you were successfully killing them in the shorter amount of time than it took for the fire to really kick in. I think fire will get stronger as enemies get more and more health, and you can stack up those burns and see the benefit, but lower health enemies really made fire feel not so good. On the boss, you started to get the feel of that potential of fire, where when you burned the boss for a while, you were stacking up that darker red burning health pool, and were able to see a little bit of the damage, but really it didn't, again, make up for it. I think the pure power that we saw with the Frost build, and what we're going to see in the Arc build, in comparison to what this little bits of fire could do, really made fire feel lackluster. I like to feel a lot more powerful as a fire mage and more explosions going on. This one felt like little tiny chip damage and just tiny little pokes, which wasn't great. Fireball, on the other hand, was much more what you're expecting from fire. You're hurling out this massive ball of fire to deal a much larger amount of damage. It is enhanced with an increased radius, and you can even go into those destructive or greater options to make it have a higher critical strike chance. Each time you hit an enemy, the bonus goes up. Or the Greater Fireball, which kind of has weird wording, deals 10% of the burning damage you've applied to enemies as additional direct damage. So when the Fireball hits the target, my understanding is that a little bit of the dot damage you've done recently gets applied to that initial burst of the Fireball. So that's how it played out. It definitely felt more like what I was hoping for out of a fire specialization, but with that weaker basic skill still just dealing a tiny amount of damage and an insignificant burn, I wasn't really loving fire. So for lightning magic, Arc Lash kind of felt out of place for the mage. The Arc Lash is like a melee style attack, and you do a little bit of a whip. Every 10th time you hit with this whip, it'll stun targets, but it really made you feel like you had to get really up and close and personal, and you didn't really want to be there. It was not thematically rewarding for what was going on, although it did feel quite strong. Enhancing it just makes it so that critical strikes slash twice. This felt quite rewarding. I am hoping on release that Chain Lightning ends up being weaker because it was so strong. Although I loved how it made me feel, compared to everything else that I played, I just ended up casting Chain Lightning like crazy. I stopped caring about anything else. It was just an absolute powerhouse of ability. Enhancing it gives it increased critical strike chance per bounce, so the more targets there are, the even better it is. And it bounces off of you, so even on single targets, it bounces back and forth and absolutely decimates those elite targets. The destructive enhancement of it makes it when it critically strikes, it has a chance to form crackling energy puddles on the ground. This is really good for AoE situations, and then Greater Chain Lightning was amazing for single target, where if it bounced off you, it increases damage dealt significantly to the target. Awesome for boss killing. The Sorcerer is actually the class I got the highest level in the beta, and I definitely felt like it was overpowered in comparison to everything else that I tried. I don't love that. I don't love feeling overpowered myself. I like there to be a little bit of a challenge, and it just did not feel like there was any form of challenge when running around as this lightning mage. I was able to just burst everything down. Nothing ended up being a threat. I'd expected bosses to be a little bit different, but because of that bouncing from the Greater Chain Lightning, the boss's health evaporated once I began casting Chain Lightning on it. I started off trying to just cast the Lash and seeing what it would do, and it wasn't really significant, but once Chain Lightning came into the mix in my boss fight, I ended up just absolutely shredding it, and it was not a threat. This continued to be for boss after boss as I leveled through the beta. I was able to just run up, shoot out some Chain Lightnings, and just make it disappear without feeling like it had any chance of taking me out. The other basic lightning attack is Spark, which zaps an enemy 4 times, dealing small amounts of damage each zap. Or, when you enhance it, it begins to zap additional times or bounces to additional targets. This felt really good, and probably what I should have chained with Chain Lightning, but I was trying out the Arc Lash in my initial play. The secondary skill other option is Charged Bolts, which sends these charged bolts down the ground at your targets. This was a really unreliable attack. It was hard to control, and it went all over the place without you really being able to know who you were going to attack. I had plenty of times where I used this skill, and it did not end up being particularly effective. It would probably be better if I was in melee range, again with that Arc Flash ability. Enhancing this makes it that hitting the enemy at least 3 times with those charge bolts releases a lightning nova, dealing damage to enemies around that target. Those big explosions were quite rewarding. Destructive option here, hitting enemy with charge bolt reduces their damage dealt by 20% for 3 seconds. really good if you're going to be up in front and tanking, where greater Charge Bolt deals 25% increased damage to stun targets. If you can manage to pick up stun out in your battles, this is an amazing ability to pick up. Stun doesn't exactly implement in the first little bit, and you definitely need other enhancements to get that skill to activate. Overall, this different specialization took a lot longer to kill pretty much everything than the first specialization of lightning that I looked at, and felt quite a bit weaker than the ice as well. If we're looking at it here on the boss, the little tiny pokes of damage that I was able to push out with this basic skill was very insignificant, and the Charge Bolt ability on the ground was so unreliable, sometimes it was only dealing 3 or 5 damage to the boss for a massive mana investment. So I definitely was not feeling the specialization of Spark. I'm usually quite fond of lightning magic, and this combo of the two really wasn't working out well. The basic Spark with Chain Lightning might have worked a little bit better, but I don't see Arc Lash with these Charge Bolts actually being particularly good against bosses, and I don't see it really being reliable at all throughout the game, so I would probably avoid that secondary skill. It just zaps all over the place and is just too unreliable to be good. If mastering the elements is your jam, the Sorcerer is definitely what you should pick up. Frost, Fire, and Lightning are all within this awesome class's control. I hope these set of guides helped you figure out what class you're going to play in Diablo 4. If you haven't checked out our other videos, don't forget to check them out in the playlist.